This episode of A Conversation with John Conenna is sponsored by Generate. In today's digital age, staying ahead means harnessing the power of generative AI. Wondering how your small or medium-sized business can join this revolution? Look no further than Generate, your strategic partner for integrating cutting-edge generative AI solutions. We create personalized plans, adapting existing AI technologies to fit your specific business needs. Plus, our expert team provides essential training, empowering you to make the most of these innovative technologies. Interested in transforming your business with AI? Reach out to us at generateteam@gmail.com. That's generate, GENERAIT, team@gmail.com. And now, on with the episode.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Today, it brings me great pleasure to do a part two with this gentleman. We are bringing in today author John Owens. John is the award-winning media professional with more than 30 years of experience as a writer, journalist, producer, director, and videographer. His film, The City's Pastime, received the Chicago Midwest Emmy Award for the Best Historical Documentary in 2005, and his film, Kenwood's Journey, won the Chicago Midwest Emmy Award for Best Topical Documentary in 2015. But I have to tell you again, what caught the eye of me in this interview, John, believe it or not, from 2.5 years ago, was about this great book, The Chili Dog MVP, about the great Dick Allen, the 1972 White Sox, and a transforming Chicago. And when I picked up this book, of course, this book was written in 21. It really got me started to get a hold of John Owens, of course, one of the authors, and of course, David J. Fletcher, and edited by George Castle. John, great to see you after all this time. And we're also going to talk a little bit again about that book, but we're going to talk about something special that's coming up, hopefully, for Mr. Allen on December 8th. How have you been?
I've been okay, John. Thanks for asking. I mean, you're right. Dick Allen is up again for another Hall of Fame vote, and this time, his last two votes, I believe, in 2014 and 2021, he just missed by one vote. So
Yes.
I think this might be the year that he gets in. The vote is for the classic era
It's the
committee.
classic era that's coming up on December 8th, which is going to feature him on that, Luis Tiant, who just passed away, the former Boston Red Sox World Series hero, Dave Parker, who I know is not in very good health these days, but a tremendous player, kind of out of the style of an Allen. Tommy John, the lefty here, who was in Chicago. Matter of fact, Tommy John was traded for Dick Allen. And of
Yes.
course, Steve Garvey, who I just saw ran for Senate, and Ken Boyer, and I was hoping an Italian gentleman by the name of Rocky Colavito was going to be on that list, but he's not. But that's a story for another day.
Rocky
Um,
Colavito should be on that list, a famous ball player from the 50s and 60s, most notably with the Cleveland Indians. He was
yes,
a
yes, yes.
great power hitter during an era when pitching dominated, much like Dick. So, I mean, he's more than worthy.
Exactly, exactly. I have to tell you, the book again, I'm going back to the book, and I want to talk about what you said. This is the classic era committee, and I think he's been, of course, he missed by one vote, Dick, when we talk about Dick Allen on the I think it's the Grand Something Committee, the Grand I forget the name of the word they associated with the Grand Something Committee of like the old timers events or something, where he missed by one vote. So I guess my question is going to be later on, if this is all going to take into consideration, and he lost by one vote before. I think he had to get 15 and he got 14. But
Right.
let's go back to the book. When you heard this coming on for this December 8th, what goes through your mind? Because again, I want to touch base on how again did you and David get involved with Allen at that time? I mean, what was the big thing that we were going to write now this book about? Of course, Dick Allen from that years with the White Sox, Philadelphia, and everything else.
Right. Well, I have to credit my writing partner, David Fletcher, who coincidentally I met. You mentioned The City's Pastime, the documentary from 2004 about Chicago baseball. I met him then because he was active in trying to clear Buck Weaver's name. Buck Weaver, the one of the Black Sox,
Yes.
who who has always maintained that he was innocent, and he was part of a group called clearbuck.com back then. I met him then, and we developed an association and a friendship. And I had reached out to Dick initially back in 2012. I don't know if you remember, but in 2012, which was actually a good season for the White Sox, they competed down to the last couple of weeks, if you remember.
Right.
Uh, they still had AJ and Konerko at that time, and Alex Rios and others. But during that year, they were celebrating for that entire year the 1972 White Sox. It was the 40th anniversary of that great team that Dick Allen starred on, and really was responsible for creating renewed interest in the White Sox after they had threatened to move to Milwaukee a few years earlier. So he was being celebrated along with the rest of that great team that we all remember, we being the folks who are old enough to remember that team.
Exactly.
If you remember that year in 2012, they wore the red pinstripes. So
Yes, on Sundays, right?
on Sundays. Usually
Yes.
they wear the 83s, but for that one year they wore the red pinstripes, which was great. And then there was an event, I believe in June or July, where Dick actually, and this was a first because Dick hadn't been back to Chicago since Old Timers game, or he hadn't been back to Sox Park since an Old Timers game back in the late 80s, Old Sox Park, which we covered in Chili Dog MVP. So this was his first time back, and he was renewing relationships with people like Steve Stone, who was a close friend and a
Sure.
teammate back in
Bill
70,
Melton.
Bill Melton and others. And that's when I first got the chance to meet Dick and do a brief piece on him, multimedia piece on him for the Chicago Tribune. And he was just a wonderful, generous guy. When Doc, David Fletcher, and I met him, very generous with his time and his
Uh-huh.
memories. So that's when we first met him. And then flash forward to 2020, the pandemic year, when Dick was in poor health. My writing partner, David Fletcher, who is a doctor, a literal doctor
Doctor,
who
yes.
specializes in he does work for Midwest Orthopedics. So he was working with Dick on medical things. For instance, his hand, which he injured when he was playing with the Phillies back in the late 60s. He had tried to push his car up a hill and pushed his hand through the headlight and ripped up a ligament, and it affected
Wow.
him for the rest of his career and really the rest of his life. His life, if you looked at his hand was all
Mangled.
and mangled because of
Yes.
that injury that occurred almost 60 years ago. So Doc was working with him as a medic, and knew that he was wasn't in great shape. So we started talking with Dick about doing a book about him during his time here in Chicago, and he was interested. Unfortunately, Dick passed away before we could really talk to him about the book. He died in the late 2020, right before he was on the Golden Era Committee ballot
Right.
back in 21. So our goal was to get this book out for that 2021 vote, which we did. It was December of 2021,
Right.
just days before. And I believe that the book really helped get him out in the public again. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who he was loved by a lot of teammates, and he was some folks had reservations about him because he had a controversial career for a number of
Right.
reasons.
And,
So the
and
bottom line,
again, of course, starting in Philadelphia, when you're coming from Arkansas and these towns, I mean, starting in Philadelphia, you talk about, and you hate to use this word. I hate to use this word, but it was one of the bigger racist cities
yeah,
at that time in 1963, 1964.
that and I mean it's just a tough and still is a very tough fan.
Oh,
You
right.
know, they accept nothing but the best in Philadelphia, which is we can understand that as Sox fans. We saw this last year how frustrated the fan base was with what happened. So that's understandable. But yeah, it was a difficult situation for him to come up in. And he when he was traded here and found a loving appreciative fan base, it really affected him.
Sure.
Affected him to the point where his son, Richie Jr., told my colleague David Fletcher that if he were to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, he would be inducted as a White Sox, which would be
Really? Well, you have stolen one of my questions for today. I was looking at all this, and I know because he starts, of course, with Philadelphia, goes to St. Louis for that short-term White Sox. I think he had the couple
Dodgers
with the
for
A's,
a
but
year.
then goes back to Philadelphia to
Right.
finish his career. So I was saying, okay, he's going to be in a Philly uniform, but you really do believe that this
Well,
would happen?
that's what his son said. Although, I also have to say that the Phillies have done a really good job in trying to promote him in recently. I think they were really behind him for this 2021 push, whereas the White Sox were totally behind Minnie Minoso, which is understandable, and Minnie got in, deservedly so.
Right.
Late, but deservedly so. But Jerry Reinsdorf has never been the biggest fan of Dick Allen. He hasn't really been the biggest fan of any of the team's history prior to his buying the team in 1981. So that's another hurdle that Dick has to face. The fact that the team where he really made his name, not made his name, but really had a lot of success, isn't really active in promoting him as a.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing it up that way. I've been on kind of this little mission, and I think you'll remember this gentleman, a little mission, but I think there should be and of course, this is out of the Reinsdorf thing, but he didn't play under the Reinsdorf era. There should be a guy, number 2, Norman Van Leer, in the rafters of the United Sign, in
Oh
my
yeah,
opinion. In
absolutely.
my opinion, if Jerry Sloan could be in the rafters, nothing against Mr. Sloan, a hard-nosed player, but Van Leer was the things to the wall every night.
Right. Both as a player, and then later he really represented the team well as a broadcaster for years. So yeah.
Exactly. So I find that to be strange, but of course, again, I was hoping for some backing there. When this all happened, and this is something that I didn't ask you in our first interview when you came on. I mean, were you hip to the idea, John? Was like, wow, we're gonna do this piece on, probably one of the greatest underrated baseball players of that era.
Yeah, well, I was because I'm 59, so I grew up right around the time that Dick I first became conscious of baseball right around the time that Dick was traded from the Dodgers to the Sox for Tommy John, a
Right?
fellow
Who's on this committee?
candidate. And he was everything. My dad was a Cubs fan, so I paid attention to both teams. But Dick Allen was special because he was so unique. He was such a character, and he was such a great player. And the stats, support him on that. From 64 to 74, there was no, with the exception of Hank Aaron, there was no one who was as productive as Dick. I mean, he finished with the 58 WAR, which is
Yes.
great. I'm looking at stats right here. His
Yeah.
OPS from 64 to 74 was 941. Only Dick Allen was better, or only Henry Aaron was better.
Aaron.
Slugging percentage 554 from 1964 to 1974. Second again, only to Hank Aaron. And only Billy Williams had more extra base hits than Dick Allen. Dick Allen's 670 during that period from 64 to 74. And then, Billy Williams and Hank Aaron obviously are both Hall of
Hall
Famers.
of Famers.
And they both had Billy Williams was around from what I think a lot of people, another excuse for Dick is that, he didn't play long enough. Well, Billy Williams played from 60 to 76. Basically,
Yes, he wanted to put the A's straight in 70. But you're right. I mean, a 292 lifetime batting average, 351 home runs, 1,119 RBIs, 64 rookie of the year, 72 most valuable player. And in that 72 year, he was the RBI leading hitter. So again, sometimes, John, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of this, oh, yeah, but Allen didn't have a World Series ring, or Billy, hey, here we go with all this to kind of, I feel like, the good guys club manipulates the system.
right. Because if that were excuse, then why is Ernie Banks in, and
Right.
Ernie Banks had great numbers, obviously.
Yeah.
Billy Williams, he never got to the series as well. So that I don't know if that's a legit excuse. There's other players in the Hall of Fame who didn't have a lot of postseason experience. Dick did have that one year with the Phillies that they
Sure.
made the playoffs in '75, and I think it was on the '76 team as well. So
As well, right? I have to ask you, as you know, we went through an era of the to try to compare Dick's issues to now. We went through this steroid era where these guys like Sosa and McGuire and Rafael Palmeiro did all their things that they did to enhance what they ever had to do to make themselves better baseball players. And of course, then we have the gentleman that just died, Pete Rose, who gambled on baseball, something that's physically or mentally, done, saw, whatever Bartlett Giamatti imposed on him. But when we go to Dick Allen, this is how I look at Dick. Okay, either you like me or you don't, but I don't think Allen was the type to bring problems into a clubhouse.
no, on the contrary, he was always a favorite within the clubhouse.
Right.
But other than the famed incident with Frank Thomas, not our Frank Thomas, but the Frank Thomas who played for the Pirates and the Phillies back in the '60s, when they got into a notorious argument at Shibe Park back in '65 on the 4th of July, where Frank Thomas ended up attacking Dick with a bat after they got into a physical altercation, and Thomas was traded immediately afterwards, and then that really set Phillies fans against Dick for the rest of his
Of
Philadelphia
course, yeah.
career.
Why?
But other than that, he did play by his own rules, and he wasn't necessarily a guy to take batting practice. He was a guy
Right,
who
right.
would often show up late, and didn't necessarily play by management rules, but among other players and sympathetic management, like most notably Chuck Tanner, his manager with the White Sox. He was the quintessential teammate, someone who's always there for advice, who was always there for support. Goose Gossage,
Right. Who writes the
always
who wrote the forward in this book? Yes.
he mentions in that forward, and we mentioned it in the book, how helpful Dick was to Goose in a career which obviously ended up in the Hall of Fame. He was almost unanimously loved in that Sox clubhouse, with the exception of a few people like Rick Reichert. But other than him, he was a very popular figure. So that's not necessarily true, but it is true that he didn't really play by the rules in terms of
Sure.
maybe showing up on time for certain things, and that's something that many hold against him, like Bill James, for instance, the famous statistician, who said that he called him a locker room cancer because of the fact that he didn't necessarily show up on time for batting practice, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. I have to tell you, I mean, when you go back, when I first met you, I read through this book, but I didn't read through it all the way. But then I go to find out some of the great things about Allen that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know the relationship with Chuck Tanner, because they were both from Wampum, Pennsylvania, which Dick was born. And I think Tanner, got coming to Chicago, had to be like, wow, what a difference here. I'm coming up to the plate. I'm not getting beer cans thrown at me. I'm getting cheers to, people are wearing a number 15 t-shirt. Yeah, there had to be something for him. I mean, how big of a thing was 72 for him, the individual, after what he had faced from 64 to 72, and still had the great stats?
Right. Well, as you mentioned, I mean, he was shocked by it was almost immediate, and in retrospect, it's kind of surprising. Tommy John was a fairly popular player who would have a wonderful career. I'd
Right.
argue that he's definitely Hall of Fame worthy as well, not only for his the longevity of his career and the success that he had, but also obviously the surgery that's named after him. But it could have been seen. It was kind of a controversial trade at the time, because Tommy John was a great, top of the rotation pitcher, and he was traded for someone who was considered by some a malcontent, but almost immediately, Dick was getting support from the fan base because he was doing things that, no White Sox player had ever done before. The White Sox, the go-go Sox of the '50s and '60s that would put up all those great numbers year after year.
Sure.
They were great teams, but they were built on pitching and defense. They didn't really have a lot of power hitters. You know, Bill
No.
Bill Melton was the guy who broke the home run record for the White Sox the year before Dick Allen got there in '71. So the just seeing this guy who's he looks like a '70s action star, like a Jim Brown type,
Yeah.
uh, leather jackets, but he's also a great power hitter and a great five-tool player. I mean, he's underrated as a base runner. He stole bases
Oh,
when
he
he
was, yes.
steal bases. He had improved his defense. He was never considered a great defensive player. He started out at third base with the Phillies, and then they moved him to first. But he had solidified things to the point where he was more than adequate in the field as well by the time he got to the White Sox. So, and then he brought a great knowledge about the game. He was a very knowledgeable
Yes.
person about baseball, and the fans appreciated this. So by the time we start the book with the famous Bat Day doubleheader where he hit the home run off Sparky Lyle in the nightcap to complete a sweep in front of the largest crowd at Comiskey Park. I think in
Is
Comiskey Park,
that the chili dog day? I think, yeah,
the
that's the
chili
chili
dog,
dog day when he came out of
the
the, yeah,
chili dog day. By
yeah,
that time, he was already a legend, and he was only 2 months in his stay with the White Sox. So, and he was shocked. He was shocked by that. He was also shocked by, and we mentioned this in the book. The White Sox have always really drawn a diverse crowd, even to this day. And he was shocked by the fact that it was so multicultural in the stands. It was something that he didn't see in Philadelphia, and it was really a breath of fresh air for him. So that was another thing that he had mentioned that we mentioned in the book.
yeah. And again, and I want to get to the book again real quick, and then I want to ask you something about this classic committee that we'll talk about. I have to tell you, I love the way you just put that because, coming to Chicago, I felt, okay, we are more of a controlled, let's respect every type of a crowd, even if it was in the '70s, mind your own business. Let's not be making catcalls about any kind of racism, any kind of other thing. And I like the way you put that because when you hear about other cities, we're going into the 1970s. This should have been done and over with, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Kenny McReynolds, the broadcaster who we talked to in the book, he
Great
also
guy.
mentioned that. That's one thing about the White Sox going all the way back to the '50s is that they always had this really interesting crowd that covered all races and creeds and economic status. It's unique to other crowds in the city, and that's it's admirable, and it's something that's been noticed by players, most notably by Dick.
For sure, for sure. John, how going to the book? Now, when I interviewed you, of course, it was 2 years ago, and the book and everything. How has Chili Dog MVP done in the sense of does a John Owens, Dr. David Fletcher, do you hear some things like, are you still getting that call or that email from somebody that's, wow, this is unbelievable. I mean, this is a 400-page book, as we had mentioned in our first interview. Are you still getting like, wow, this is great. This is
Yeah, we are. And the one thing about the book is it's about Dick, but it's also about the White Sox organization, which it remains an interesting organization to this
yes.
day, and it's about the city in the 1960s and 1970s under Mayor Richard J. Daley and the changes that were going on in the city and in all the different neighborhoods during that time. So it's not just a sports book. Excuse me.
No problem.
And I think that, what's gratifying is people have noticed that was our intent to cover not only Dick. I mean, it's primarily about Dick and his personality and his character, but there are dozens of other characters in the book from the White Sox organization and from the city who've contacted us. For instance, John Allen was he's not celebrated today.
He
He's
was
not.
the owner then, correct?
He was the owner then, and people don't mention him like they still talk about Bill Veeck today. But John Allen, we say that Dick Allen was the savior for the team, and he regenerated interest in the team. But John Allen literally saved the Sox from
Oh,
going
sure.
going to Milwaukee in 1969. He was the guy who when his brother Art Allen, who had the majority stock in 69, was going through a lengthy negotiations with Bud Selig to move the team
To
to
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee to replace the Braves, who had moved to Atlanta a few years
Right.
earlier. It was a done deal. It was basically a done deal, and John, being a he grew up in Wilmette, lived in Wilmette, so he's not the your typical guy that you would associate with the White Sox.
Yeah, quintessential White Sox guy, right?
Right. Yeah. In fact, he was a Cubs fan growing up, but he became a fan of the team after he and his brother bought the team in the '60s, and they had actually been around earlier than that under the Veck administration, have been minority owners going back to Veck when Veck bought the team in '58. But John said that this team needs to be in Chicago. It's a charter team. It needs to be in Chicago. We
Sure.
don't need to lease a stadium like County Stadium in Milwaukee. We've got a perfectly fine facility right now. It's located right off the expressway and has all these different ways to get there. We're going to stay in this stadium that we already own and try to build up our fan base that already exists. So
Sure.
that was something that I didn't really know about until we started doing the research about how important John Allen was to the team. And we after the book came out, we've been talking to John Allen's grandson, who's the family's based in Florida now, and they love the book, and we've been talking to them periodically about the Allen family and their role in keeping the team in Chicago.
Keeping in Chicago, right? And there's always been these scares. I mean, I remember then, like right after the Allens, Bill Veck bought the team again before he sold it to Reinsdorf, because now he can't afford this with the way baseball was going, with, of course, all this free agency and everything else. So,
Right.
Incredible. All right,
Right.
let's go to this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, John.
There's so many different threats. 69, Milwaukee.
Yes.
75 was Seattle. 80 was either Denver or somewhere else. Marvin Davis, the Broncos owner, was interested in the Sox.
Yes.
88 was was Tampa, where the
Right.
Rays now play. And now today we've got the Nashville threat. So,
Yeah, the Nashville thing. I wonder what's swirling there. I hope Reinsdorf sells the team, but somebody keeps it in Chicago. But my reasons for Reinsdorf for something else, because I have a feeling the other team that plays on the hardwood is having the same issues. They never change anything or keep running into problems. Right. I have to ask you, we talked about this. I'm sorry, to correct myself in the beginning, it's the Golden Age Committee that Dick missed by one vote. I think he got 14 of the 15. So I'm hoping that from this Golden Age Committee, now does Dick have to now get another 15, or I think it's 12 to 15 votes on the Classic Committee to get in? Do you know if there's a carryover, is where I was going with this?
I don't think there's a carryover from the last vote, and I'm not sure about the constitution of the committee. I know that he had friends on the committee last time, like Jim Cott, for another former teammate.
Yes.
He's really been active in promoting Dick.
That's
so
fantastic.
I would hope that Jim Cott, who's very much around today and very much active, is on the committee this time to put in the good word for Dick.
John, I did do a little reading again last night, knowing that you were going to come on the program today. They have not picked those committee members, and of course, Cott, I just read, turned 86 years old. He was on that team from 72 to 74. They picked him up from Minnesota, I remember. Right. But knowing that, now that floors me that Cott would be promoting Dick, because, Cott as an announcer, great pitcher, always kind of gave me this, how do I want to put it, Joe Buck kind of an attitude. But this is great when you can have a gentleman like that.
Well, this brings us back to our point that he was very much loved in the clubhouse, yes, and very much respected as a really good baseball mind, in addition to being a great player, and pretty much everybody accepted him as that, like Jim Cott, for instance.
Sure. When you look back, I got to ask you, if in your heart of hearts, we're going to do a little thing with you here at the end, and there's something I want to read about what Dick Allen said about himself, but I'm going to do a little something different with you here at the end. In your heart of hearts here now, knowing that this December 8th looms a little bit less than a month away, do you feel, I'll tell you my thing, I feel he gets in. Do you feel he gets in this time?
I think he will, although he's got a lot of competition. A lot of competition with people who have Sox ties, like Tommy John, obviously. As you mentioned, Dave Parker, he's still around and not
Yes.
doing. He was an incredible talent. All these players. Ken Boyer was, best known for his defense, I think. But I mean, he
Right. Had a cup of coffee here in '67 with Colin.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. That's
yeah.
right. Another Sox connection. And John Donaldson, the Negro League player, he was a scout for the Sox. I think he was the first black scout in the major leagues. And he was the guy who he worked for them in the late 40s, early 50s.
Oh, wow.
And he suggested that they sign both Willie Mays and Ernie Banks.
Oh, wow.
They didn't do it.
Something I didn't know. When I was looking down the list, John, I saw a gentleman by the name of Vic Harris, and I says, "Wait a minute!"
I remember
Harris replaced. I thought it was the Vic Harris who replaced Glenn Beckert in '70.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, it was another Vic Harris.
What did I miss the summer of baseball? But it was the Vic Harris, I think, from the Negro Leagues, correct?
Negro Leagues. That's right.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
I remember that Vic Harris though very well. He was part of that Cubs rebuild.
Yeah, with Madlock. He came up with Bill Madlock.
Bill Madlock. Yeah, that's right.
But no, great names on this list, of course. Garvey has had his issues in life, and of course now running for Senate and all that. But
what happened? He lost, right?
He did lose. Yeah, he did lose to the incumbent. Yeah,
he's another one. I mean, he had almost 20 years and played on a lot of great teams. Both in San Diego. I can see him getting in very easily.
Yeah. But when I look at Dick's numbers, they're way better than Steve Garvey's.
Yeah.
So again,
he has a little more time. He's what, 74, 75?
Yeah, exactly. So he could wait. Yeah. But I would love to see if I had to pick three on this list, I would love to see John, of course. But if I had to pick the other three, I would love to see Dick, Louis, Tion, and Parker.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And Louis Tion, we didn't talk about his,
tremendous. Career. I mean,
Cleveland and Boston.
And
a unique pitcher, unique looking delivery.
That wind up when he would throw your back to you, it was something else.
We all did that on the playground, where he would. Everybody would do their Louis Tion imitation.
Before I go into this little thing, I'm going to ask you 5 questions. Some of them are fun. Some of them are we want to get to know John Owens a little bit. The 1-word answers to set an answer. You're still with Channel 7, correct?
Yes.
At this time, and you're doing a lot of producing and stuff.
Yeah, but producing for different Heritage Month specials, parades like the upcoming Mag Mile, Lights Fest, and Countdown Chicago, their New Year's Eve.
Yeah,
and then it's things like there's a network called Localish, so producing pieces for them.
Nice. Your reputation and work ethic is just tremendous, and of course, what you told me at the top of the hour here. Well, okay, I got 5 questions for you, and then I'm going to say something about what Dick Allen said about himself.
Okay,
but. For John Owens, question number 1, who's some of those early mentors that gave you this great career that you still talk about to this day? 1 or 2 mentors that you still talk about?
Rick Cogan with the Chicago Tribune, longtime brilliant writer and broadcaster. Just a wonderful person, generous with his time, generous with his advice. There's a guy who passed away who also worked at the Tribune. A lot of people at the Tribune, because I worked there for plus years, and it really shaped my life. But there's another guy named Mark Hinojosa who passed away in 2019. He was a brilliant photo editor and later became a multimedia editor. So Rick is one, Mark is another, and there's countless other people from the Tribune.
I appreciate you bringing those up because I wanted to ask you something different from the last time. What is John Owens? You can pick 2. I'm only going to give you 2. Your favorite movie that you can watch 200 times and not get bored?
Well, I mean, The Godfather is one that everybody loves.
Okay. Right.
The trilogy, the first 2 of the 3, are films I could watch over and over again. There's a Sunset Boulevard, which was an older movie from the 50s. Billy Wilder.
Yes, I remember it well. You got to remember, I'm older than you now. I'm 65. So.
Goodfellas is a good one. And, Scorsese had a number of brilliant films. So Citizen Kane,
Oh,
that one.
great.
Yeah.
You've picked some good ones for sure, for sure.
Classics. The classics.
The classics. What's the go-to meal for John Owens?
Ooh.
Go-to meal, go-to restaurant in the city.
Go-to meal, go-to restaurant. Joe Stone Crab. I'm a
Okay,
big seafood fan, and
got it.
Joe's is about the best for seafood. Oh, either that or Shaw's.
Oh, okay. So you picked two good ones. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, you can't go wrong there. All right, of all this craziness that we face every day, and we saw another crazy loss yesterday here in Chicago on a Sunday that just ruins our Sunday nights. What is your favorite sport team in Chicago? I mean, favorite sport.
Oh, I'd have to say the Bulls just because I loved them as a kid when, we were talking before about Van Leer and Sloan and
Oh,
Tom Winkle and Chet the Jet Walker and Bob
Bobby
Love.
Love.
Oh, and going to the stadium back then to see them with those crowds that they had, they just
Sure.
generate a love for me that as bad as they've been recently, it's something that I just can't shake because of those early great teams in the 70s, and then of
Oh,
course Jordan era teams, which really were the best. It was the best dynasty that Chicago's ever had.
John, I have not gotten over 1975 when you brought up those
Oh,
five gentlemen: Van
oh,
Leer, Sloan, Chet the Jet, Butterbean Love, and Tommy Borwinkle, and a guy by the name of, well, at that time we traded Clifford Ray for Nate Thurman.
right, which was probably a bad move.
Yeah, because Nate was already,
Washed up.
1 foot at the restaurant. But I have to tell you, I still can't believe they lost to the Golden
I
State Warriors.
know, I know.
That was something. I think if they get past Golden State in 1975, they
They
win
would
it.
have won it all. And I
Yeah.
wonder what the organization would have been like if that had happened.
Oh, incredible, incredible. Because then that got depleted right after that. Right, exactly.
Right.
Um, what's in the last question? And I'm going to say something about what Alan said about himself. But what's in the future for John Owens?
So I'm working on a couple of screenplays. I'm studying at UCLA. They've got a screenwriting program, so I'm working on a couple of screenplays, hoping to get an agent for these screenplays
Mhm.
where Doc and I are talking about another book, this time looking at the drama behind the building of the new Comiskey Park. Uh,
Okay.
which we started writing and we're holding off because we want to see what continues to develop with this whole South Loop idea and what happens with the team. So that may be a year or two off. And then working on other projects. I worked on a Chicago Stories, the WTTW Chicago Stories episode this year called "When the West Side Burns," and I'm hoping to work on the series again next year.
Oh,
So,
wow, that's fantastic.
you
And
know.
John, thank you for bringing WTTW up. I had the great pleasure, and she's going to be coming on again to interview Brandis Friedman. Uh,
Oh, wow, that's great.
yeah,
That's
she
great.
what a lovely young lady, and was shocked when she said yes, just as shocked as when you said yes to me. So just Brandis has been great. Jewel Hillary, a lot of some really great journalists here in the
Is
city.
she a sports fan?
Brandis, I can't remember. Jewel Hillary is.
Uh-huh.
So, but Brandis does a great job there. What a presence again she has when she comes on Chicago Tonight and Chicago Black Voices. Yeah,
Yep.
fantastic. Well, I gotta leave you with this. I was doing some research on Alan, and of course, Dick knows what he went through in the life. And like I says, the good, the bad, the ugly. When there was that song, of course, but he says here, "I wonder how good I could have been." Alan wrote in his memoir. It could have been a joy, a celebration. Instead, I played angry. In baseball, if a couple things go wrong for you and those things get misperceived or distorted, you get a label. I was labeled an outlaw. I hope I'm not remembered as one. And that was the great Dick Allen. Uh,
That's a wonderful quote.
yeah, beautiful
It
quote. And
really captures him well.
Yeah,
Hey, that picture, that famous picture of him juggling baseballs with the cigarette.
yes.
He hated that picture. He hated the picture because of the cigarette. He didn't want to encourage smoking, and he
Wow.
knew that that smoking, it leads to lung cancer. He thought that was just a bad image. It presented a bad image of himself. So,
Sure.
and I wonder if he seemed very troubled, especially during the years with the Phillies, those late years. I think he may have had a breakdown at some point in 68 or 69 when he left the team for that
Sure.
period for a couple of weeks.
The
So
stresses and the pressures had to be only a Dick Allen can know, but I wanted to read you that quote.
wonderful.
John, I want to thank you again for today. We touched on some other things, and we're going to keep in touch. I just love that I made a connection with a man that here was my childhood hero in 72 on the South Side. And this great book, Chili Dog MVP, authors John Owens and David J. Fletcher, edited by George Castle. I have to tell you, the Dick Allen, the 1972 White Sox, A Transforming Chicago, fantastic book. We can still get it, John?
Yes, it's still available at eckhartspress.com. And you can also get the ebook on Amazon.
Amazon. This is fantastic. You'll promise if you do write that story. Well, I'm going to get a hold of you after December 8th because I think we're going to get the news that Dick got in. And if that's the case, remember, we heard it here on this podcast, on this interview, a conversation with John Conenna. And if you do write that other book, I'll be calling on you, my friend, because I love calling you my friend.
Yeah, same here, John.
You got
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, and have a great day. And I'll get this out. We'll get this out to our audience on Spotify and YouTube in the coming days, couple days.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
You too, sir.
Available now at Amazon and everywhere books are sold online. Siciliana. Siciliana is a captivating novel that embodies the ferocity of a woman wronged while contemplating complex questions of home and country. This thrilling story of a 13th century Sicilian revolution will dazzle fans of historical fiction. You will find much here to relish, tremble at, and in the end, cheer. Purchase your copy today.